Well, thank you so much for coming today. We are in a new episode of the Future of B2B Digital Marketing podcast. Today, we will talk about the art of brand building, content challenges, and the nuances of marketing in specialized sectors. We will begin explaining the human element in business and marketing. We'll discuss the significance of making individuals feel valued and heard, and how language plays a pivotal role in this. We'll touch upon the cultural and generational shifts in language and how they shape our messages. Then we will transition into the evolution of brand building in the digital age, as brand identities are constantly changing. And lastly, we will venture into navigating marketing in specialized sectors. So highlighting the importance of the robust technological infrastructure, agility required in marketing campaigns, and the challenges communicating complex regulations across the different markets. So let's talk about the human element of business and marketing. Annie, sorry. Before we start, so could you start giving a short sentence on yourself, please?
Yeah, of course. Hi, my name's Annie Mirza. I'm a copywriter and content specialist. I'm currently working for a financial organization. And yeah, I've been working in content for about 10 to 10 to 12 years now. So yeah, and I also do a lot of freelance on the side as well, within content and content marketing.
Thank you. Kyra?
Hi, I work in the tech sector, and I'm also a content specialist. I focus mostly in the film, creating that kind of content, especially visually. I've also been working for probably about 10 years now. I don't really think I want to add it up in my head, but it's been a while.
Yeah. Thank you, Kyra. And Berti?
Hi, my name is Berti. So yeah, I'm a digital marketing specialist, all-round general specialist, if you want to call it that. I've been in the digital marketing space for about 18 years now. Used to be called internet marketing. That shows the age as to this, and worked in multiple different sectors, from finance to motor industry to racing industry.
Yeah, thank you, Berti. And Tom?
And I'm Tom. I'm the founder and CEO of Adzact, but I'm also leading the marketing of Adzact at the moment. It's a relatively small company of 20 people. So at the moment, I'm playing the role of the CMO and building Adzact's brand from basically nothing, because we started it earlier on this year. So yeah, that's why it's relevant to me.
And I work with Tom in marketing. I'm Joaquin Dominguez, and we are hosting this podcast. So as I was telling before, let's talk about the human element in business and marketing. Annie, we had an interesting conversation about this. Why is so important making people feel heard?
So I think, especially with business-to-business marketing, a lot of the time people can forget that you're speaking to another person, and content that delivers best is content that tells a story, because people like stories. So the human side of marketing is probably, in my own view, one of the most important elements of marketing and content. And I think that the way people interact with businesses is vital to remember whenever we're talking about content or creating marketing strategies or content strategies, whether that's digitally or offline. And it's one of the sort of key parts of any business plan. Whenever I've been working on them, is just to remember that it's the way humans behave. We need to remember how they do that, and what people like, what culture is, what the timeline is that we're in. For example, there's always a pop culture zeitgeist. Can we tap into that? Because at the end of the day, it's a human speaking to another human, even if it is business to business content or business to business marketing.
Yeah, I agree. And well, you didn't mention in your introduction, but you studied linguistics, right? So
yeah.
it would be really interesting to hear the importance of language in business. So why playing with words is really important in marketing and storytelling.
Yeah, absolutely. So yeah, as you mentioned, I studied linguistics in my undergrad and then also for my master's. And the language that we use and the language that we're exposed to shapes the way that we view the world. It shapes the way that we view everything. And I think within content and content marketing, it's really important to, as you said, play around with words, because words have connotations, they have different meanings. As time goes on, words' meanings change. Some of them become less popular, more popular. I think the example I always use is wicked. If you're in the UK, you know, it used to mean like a wicked witch, and then it became something really cool, and now it's sort of fallen out of favor. And so playing around with words in particular in content marketing can really change the way a message is perceived by other people. So understanding how language works and how we perceive it with other words and with the culture that we're within and within the time that we're within really affects the way a business can be seen. So whether they're seen as a bit more archaic or a bit more modern or a bit more fun, a bit more professional. You know, I think Duolingo is a really great example of a business that really uses language extremely well. They market to a Gen Z audience really well, and there's other businesses that are more professional, and that's all down to the language that they use. Also, obviously, you know, depending on the type of videos that they're creating, if they're, you know, on social media creating videos, but 100%, I think the language that we use affects the way we're perceived. And studying linguistics has helped me to understand that a lot more, like the semantics of words and where we place those words at the end of the sentence, at the beginning, that can really change the message, whether it's more authoritative or more friendly, depending on the tone of the business. So yeah, that's what I'd have to say.
Is that similar to, is that related to a business's tone of voice, or sounds like it's way more complicated than that, because you're talking about like how in an individual email you might want, or whatever, a message, an ad, strapline or something, you kind of place and structure words.
So I think it does have a lot to do with tone of voice, but it's also one of those, language is one of those things which is culturally different everywhere. I mean, even within the UK, you know, I'm actually living in Scotland at the moment, and the way people communicate with one another, the language that they use is very different to the language that's used further south, sort of in London. And so I think it's sort of a mix of both. So when we're speaking to like a UK-based client, then what kind of words are we using? I mean, you know, ones that they're more familiar with, in particular when it comes to what's popular. Versus someone that you're speaking to in America, what's seen as professional and more kind of formal in America, or in the UK, maybe it comes across as a bit more rude or a bit more cold or a bit more unfriendly. Sort of that really, like, the culture really affects the way language is perceived. So I think it is a big topic. You know, semantics and sociolinguistics is a part of linguistics. So the social side of linguistics, how people speak to one another. And so within an email as well, like, I think tone of voice is one of those things in a style guide that a business has. It should be, you know, from the tweet to the email to the book publication, it needs to go across the business so that you know, there's people can associate a business in a particular way just based on the language that they're using. And again, I think Duolingo is a great example of that. Every sort of message that you get from them is either it's a bit cheeky, it's a bit funny, you know, it's that's their style, and it's very obvious that that's them. They're kind of known for that. Like, you could probably pick out Duolingo emails, or Innocent, I think, is another brand. It's a smoothie brand in the UK. Their language as well, like, I think, you know, it's innocent when you read that. Like, you can just tell because of the style.
Very consistent.
Yeah.
Yeah, and the case of Innocent, they link a lot their language with their culture as well. The culture that they live day to day at the office, it's very linked with their with their brand. Interesting that
I do find it quite irritating. The tweeness of Innocent and what's that, Oatly, the oat milk brand, like their language again, they clearly, it's different from Innocent, but it's more kind of ironically, it's even more twee than sort of self-referentially kind of twee, but it's again quite irritating.
Coming back to the initial point that we were talking about, the human element, Berti, in your work, you need to introduce asset managers to the world, right? So how do you incorporate their thought processes in your work?
So one of the big things that we do is we focus mainly on emotional intelligence within inside digital marketing, and that emotional intelligence is really key to how we talk in our emails, because the type of person that we are engaging with, they're highly intellectual. They've got very limited amount of time, so it needs to, coming back to what you're saying, it needs to be punchy. It needs to get in there. The wording is really crucial, and the linguistic that we put into that email, into that communication, social media posts, anything that we do put in, we are constantly looking at those different factors. But the main driver for us is that emotional intelligence when it comes to the digital marketing side of things, especially with email marketing, because it's a one-to-one for us. It's not a I know everybody wants to go, it's a B2B, whether you're working B2B or B2C, you're always working B2P, which is business to person or person to person at the end of the day. And I think the messaging really needs to really drive home what you're trying to say, and actually show that you have the command of intellectual presence and the way you're putting it. And I think what I've seen over the last, while I've been working with all these asset managers, global asset managers across the world, is that they've tried to overcomplicate everything, because they think that all the investors that they're talking to are highly complex individuals, and they will understand all the technical jargon on how they're investing. But yes, they are wealthy and they are highly intelligent, but they don't want to know about the complexities. So one of the core things that we've done is when I work with any asset managers, I've actually said, you need to move it down. You need to bring it down to a layman's terms, because yes, they may be investors and they're investing, 20, 50, 100 million pounds. The size doesn't matter. But the fact is that you want to communicate with them on a personal level, rather than going, right, I'm looking at this macro, and this is going to be the driving factor for the next 2 years on your investment fund, and so forth, and just getting so complicated with the quant side of things, rather than just focusing on actually having a personal conversation. And that's one of the big things that we did from our side. We really drove down the emotional intelligence to really engage with investors.
When you mentioned email one-to-one, is because you also take part on when you send an email to an individual, or you meant sending an email campaign to a group of people with similar characteristics?
Well, we're sending to a group. So naturally, what we're doing is, from a digital marketing point of view in the business, we are warming them up to get them to a stage where they start communicating with the salesperson or the business development person one-to-one. We want to get them to that. And when we do these conversations, we really make sure that there's almost no difference that they can feel coming from a mass email that they've gotten or a generic email that we've gotten, because our emails are not overly generic. And also, because we're in asset management, we have a very small pool of people we're targeting. We're not targeting 100,000 people. We're not, it's a very small amount, especially if you go institutional. Institutional is really, really small. You're talking about 3,000 investors in the UK. That's what you're dealing with. So you need to continue that conversation as how you introduced yourself from the email marketing side of things, and then the sales team will then they will know no different. So that personalization has really been thoughtful, and that's the reason why we use the emotional intelligence side of things, instead of just going, here's a blanket email, off you go. And because intelligent people can see through blanket emails, like literally. Like you wouldn't believe. It's we've had a couple come back to us in the past going, well, this is very generic, it doesn't really suit me. And that's when we realized we need to change our trajectory and the way we're doing things.
Can I ask, this is probably too practical a question, Berti, but are there any advantages to, if you could personalize every email down to literally one-to-one, would you do that? Or do you think there are some advantage?
100%. I wouldn't even think about it twice. If I could get the more data I can get on a person that I'm interacting with, I will actually create dynamic content according to that person within the email itself. And you can do that. It's quite simple. It's quite easy to do. You know, you just need the data, and make sure that the email platform you're using can handle that data, and you've got the right triggers for that. And you can even do it in your whole customer journey. So you can have your dynamic driving from the first email you send to the 20th email that you've sent over a 3-month period. You can have that dynamic content change and be completely evolutionary as to how they are moving with
based on what they've read on their website, for example.
Yeah.
It makes sense. Well, let's move into marketing and in social media. Kyra, you've been in social media for a long time. So what's your opinion on the role of social media in humanizing brands and fostering this engagement that Berti was mentioning through email marketing? But what's the role of social media?
I think nowadays it's essential. I always tell people that you can't even not have it, because then people don't trust your business. So when you go to Google someone and you see they've got a web page, that's great. But then especially the younger generation, they'll look on Instagram, they'll look on LinkedIn, they'll look elsewhere. So if you don't exist just on that base level, people are like, is that company real? What's going on there? It kind of fosters that.
I can't find him on LinkedIn. I mean,
is
he a real person?
Exactly. Yeah, it's exactly like when, a couple of years ago, someone didn't have a Facebook, you were a bit confused, you didn't trust them. Now it's the same with companies. If they don't have social media, people don't know. But then it kind of divides into what you're looking for. Like for recruitment, I love Instagram for that. It gives you kind of shows the personality of a business. You can put, the people in there. Whereas LinkedIn is where I put my professional, is where I give my, marketing advice. I might find people that interest me in marketing. That's what I do personally. So I find companies that, might be experts in what I like. So people do the same with us, especially in tech, those sectors. They will want to look into it, see what the company is, want to see what the people are up to. So I think each one has its own purpose, but they're entirely essential. If you don't have them, you don't exist. And that, I think creates that people get a bit worried. But then if they can find you and they can kind of do a little bit of even just a first round of finding out who you are, what you're like, if they want to work for your business, or even if they just want to get in touch with one of your salespeople, I think
didn't you say you guys were sort of to some extent moving away from Facebook, using Facebook a bit less than you did?
Yeah, I don't find Facebook to be essential not for us, and I don't think much of the tech sector I've seen is on Facebook, but I was shocked that Twitter is really big. I kind of personally, I don't use Twitter anymore. I haven't used it in years. So seeing that kind of resurgence in the tech sector, and then obviously got things like Reddit, I'm finding forums. It's been fun to find that, because it's like, I didn't work in tech previously about a year ago, so I didn't know this existed. And I think that kind of taught me to be a bit more open on figuring out what works for what is your brand, and then what works then for you to go.
Are you doing like organic Reddit stuff for recruitment, or paid, or whatever it is, or is it advertising the business itself? Or
I've been looking at using Reddit just for forums of just for the tech forums, just to have, because we've got thankfully a lot of really great people in tech who can talk about it for hours and days and weeks, and that's what you want. Build that trust, knowing that expert's out there, so they can go into a forum and they can just talk about whatever form of tech. If it's security, if it's low code, they can deep dive well above my head, but that's with their community, and that works. And then even if it's someone else who maybe is in from a different company, and then it's just that connection of, oh well, actually I know that person works there, and they really seem to know what they're talking
about. Supporting people to have these kind of organic conversations on Reddit about topics that are in some way relevant, but showing their expertise.
Yeah, exactly. That's all Twitter is we just have certain people who, that's all our back and forth is, well, have you seen that they've done this? And did you check out, they actually just spoke at this event? And people have whole conversations off of one tweet where we've just said, oh, this person's speaking tomorrow, or they spoke on this and we thought it was really interesting. So it's interesting to see. It's fun. It gets our engagement up, and I don't have to do much. So it's really lovely.
You only had similar experience, right? trying to listen what people are talking on TikTok, which are the words they are using. Isn't that something you've done?
Yeah, a little bit. So I think again, I like echoing what Kyra said about businesses and organizations needing to be on social media, because otherwise they don't exist. Yeah, and especially, for example, on TikTok, I think that's a really good example. Creating content for TikTok for business to business, and also actually more business B2C, or as Berti rightly said, B2P, because it is, to a person, and seeing what words people are using and how those are trending, and creating conversations and storytelling out of those. That really changes the way that the content is created as well. So what we notice on TikTok, and for example, the trends, the videos that are performing within that industry or within that niche, for that business, taking that away and then testing it, doing a lot of A&B testing, seeing what works on other platforms as well. And TikTok and social media, I think, are a great place to find what people are talking about, what they're interested in within that sector, or even people with a keen interest. Maybe they're not working in, for example, finance or project management, but they're interested in it. What kind of language are those people using as well? How can we get them to, take a look at our brand and build that brand awareness, using the language that they're using as well? Yeah, definitely.
I actually wrote I wrote an article about this on my website, about how the trend is actually changing onto social media, is the search. I don't know if you guys have been delving into the search side of things. So who was it? HubSpot. I think it's HubSpot or one of them. I did an article of it from it. They actually did a survey, and they've actually found that something like almost 30% of users now are not using Google to search. They're actually using social media to search. So that's a huge trend that's going to be happening over the next 10 years, I would say. And where, I even said this in my piece, that where Bing and Yahoo were the big players, and then Google came along, we're starting to see now social media becoming the big player in that. It's not just for social media, and businesses do need to get their content onto social media, not just for the sake of putting it out there, but it has longevity. It's, it'll be searchable, it's indexable, it's great SEO. So yeah, that's the trend I'm seeing at the moment. I don't know if you guys are seeing the same thing on your sides.
Yeah, I would say I am. That's a really, really good point. It's one of the key things that we look at, especially when we are creating content. For example, typing that into TikTok, changing the filters. You can even change the filters now for the year to see what's relevant, what's most liked. And I think, like as you've said, a lot of the younger generation as well, like, they will use TikTok or Instagram to find content, because people, I think this is just showing us again, people want to speak to people. They want to hear from people. They don't really necessarily want to hear from a business. They feel a lot of the time like they're being sold to. So whenever you type something to Google, a search query, often it's a business snippet that comes up, and maybe people don't take that seriously. So then they go on TikTok
you
to
just
find
scroll
other
down
people.
until it doesn't say sponsored anymore.
Yeah, basically, yeah, essentially. So TikTok is a great place to do that, and it's happening a little bit on Instagram, not as much. I don't think the search function is as it's not as powerful as the one on TikTok at the moment, but I think Instagram is definitely moving there, and I think YouTube is another one, especially for people within certain industries. I would say project management's a big one. Actually, I worked in project management for a while. A lot of the time, people will go on YouTube to find the answer. How to deal with stakeholders, or how to use a Gantt chart, things like that. That's becoming more popular now. TikTok is overtaking that as well.
Right.
So.
Yeah, and I think the short form is really working well for TikTok. Naturally the long form will stay with YouTube, which is great, and you can use both of them. But I think at the end of the day, because my background is video marketing, is one of my big pieces, and I really push all my clients to do the video marketing, because that's, it connects people. We're talking today via video, and it connects instead of a normal telephone call like you would have done 5-10 years ago. This is much more it's much more pleasing to feel a connection. And yeah, I think it's fantastic the way that social media is really changing. So yeah.
My most popular LinkedIn post recently was a TikTok style video, like in portrait mode, which I actually recorded on TikTok and then put it onto. I don't think I've got any viewers on TikTok, but on LinkedIn it got quite a lot.
Yeah, but this is the whole thing. So you can find your social media platforms are really moving with what is working. You know, LinkedIn stood stagnant for, I would say, almost a decade. They didn't want to adapt and change. They tried. I don't know if any of you guys remember. They actually tried Reels on or stories on LinkedIn at one stage, but then that just got, you know, chucked to the wayside because people weren't using that part of the functionality. They still wanted it in the feed. But you know, you get rewarded putting video onto LinkedIn. You know, I've put boring asset manager videos on, and they get 7,000-8,000 views for very, you know, meet the manager talking to an asset manager or a PM or whatever the case may be. So yeah, highly recommend using video.
Yeah. Well, let's talk about the second topic we will discuss today is about brand building in digital. Of course, we are talking about this already, but Kyra, you had a great talent working with Vitality into how to get people engaged with the app. So also that human element of understanding the psychological things behind why people want to use an app, for example. Could you tell us about that experience and also how brand building helped you in that work?
Yeah, it was a big experiment. But it got me kind of interested on the psychological side behind just choosing what you want to do, what you want to look at. And for that, it was just trying to get people to connect to an app but involved in your life insurance, which is, why would anyone do that? But you have to figure out exactly that. Why
Health
would
insurance, but yeah.
Yeah, I would never think, oh, let me go on my app and that's connected to my insurance. It's just, and you know, you get perks with it. So how do I get somebody to think of these things on their day-to-day basis so they do engage with the app? But I'm not thinking about my health insurance or my life insurance all day, every day. That most people aren't. So we were trying to kind of create that engagement and trying to see, well, how do we do that? Especially because the life insurance, you never think about it. That's something you just pay for and it lives in the
You don't
background.
want to think about.
Yeah, and exactly. You don't
Yeah.
want to think about it. So then I'm just there trying to get you to think about it every day, all day, so that you're engaging with this app. And I was trying to create that where it almost gamifying, especially with the app. It was easy to kind of gamify that concept of, you know, create that engagement. People love that. Also, free stuff is easy. But yeah, if I gamify it, if you earn points, you know, you get this, even if it's just a graphic pops out, you know, if you, it's same with like fitness watches, you know, it tells you when you've hit a goal. People love that. And that's kind of was what we were looking at, was, well, how do we
What were
how
the
do we
goals? Like
stimulate?
reaching a certain age or?
No, thankfully this one was, you know, it was exercising and it was, you know,
Okay.
it was trying to be healthy. So yeah, thankfully it was
A bit like the health insurance Vitality app.
yeah. So they're
Okay.
very similar. It was just we were just trying to get people to think about their life insurance instead, which was, it was all the same thing.
That's a really interesting case study because it is, you could argue, like the thing that is most difficult to get people to think about, you know, death, obviously.
Yeah, you don't exactly want to get, you know, an alert on your phone every day that's like, by the way, you still have life insurance. By the way, you're almost dying. It's not exactly what you want to do. So we're just trying to make it, well, actually, if you're healthy, there's also your life insurance still going on, and we might bring down your prices if you're exercising, being healthy, if you're considering what you're doing, if you're not smoking, you know, you might get something, you get an extra banner or a badge, and you know, that's something that, yeah, I wouldn't think about. You know, it's good. It is really good. But you know, you're trying to make it sound fun and nice, but it was, yeah, exactly that. And then trying to get people to then say, well, I'm looking at life insurance. Why would I want to buy a life insurance that comes with an app when I could just have life insurance like everybody else? Because then there's a question of, that's a bit odd. I don't know if I want alerts for, I don't want to have to be healthy. I just want life insurance. So we kind of had to take it into steps and look at it from all angles. And it was interesting. Yeah, something I don't think I'll ever do again. Because I was like, it's a once in a lifetime, and it was really cool.
Amazing. And most recently, you work on another project that changed the brand and culture at NAS, right?
Yeah, we did a rebrand. They did a merger, we did a rebrand, and you have two companies, and you start from scratch almost. With a merger, you have to go, well, you know, you can't pick your favorite child. So you have to start from scratch and go, who are we? What do we want to do? You know, what are the good things from one? What are the good things from the other? What are the bad things? Maybe what's our tone of voice been? Did that work? Did it not work? And And I know when I walked in, they didn't do much on social for either side. So it was kind of nice, but also difficult to go, we're actually going to basically start from scratch. And then I have to build up the social. I have to create the brand from the beginning. But who even is that? But
Yeah.
I can
And
never
then,
tell if it's easier or harder to start from the beginning.
yeah, and then the internal communications is a big thing, right? If you are merging.
Yeah, you have to keep everyone happy because you've got, big companies coming together. So you have, an internal concept of the people in the business then you want to make them share your content, like your business. And then especially with sales, you've got, they're entirely LinkedIn based. We do all our content. I want them to like us enough as a company to then want to share what we've created, want to, engage with us, just so that obviously we can get off the ground, because you need people to engage with your content almost first and foremost. So yeah, you have to kind of appease everyone in that sense, but also make sure that you're saying the right things.
Sure. Annie, you also have experience with internal communications, right? So how do you see the role of internal communications in brand building?
Yeah, so I think part of the brand, or whatever the brand is, needs to be throughout an entire company. So even within internal comms, using the same sort of language that you'd be using for a message that's going out to sort of like external people, it needs to be the same. I think there needs to be pretty much like the same languages used, the same style, the same tone. Everything needs to be similar, because when colleagues are and managers, people leaders are looking at that all the time, every day, it almost becomes part, like it, when you read it in that way, you think in that way as well. Language really affects the way that we perceive the world. Like certain words will have different connotations, just based on whenever you hear something, you'll immediately think of something in your head, like an image will go off. So when everybody's using that language internally, so if there's like an intranet that's used as policy documents, for colleagues, within HR, if that language is the same as the language that the business is putting out, then people will automatically become part of the brand, almost, so that when they are speaking to customers, or when they are speaking to other businesses, they'll start using that language. It will almost become second nature for them.
Wow. I never thought of it like that.
Yeah,
Do
no.
you think Innocent and Oatly use that kind of tone in internal communications?
They probably do. I'm sure they do.
Probably, yeah.
Definitely. And and I've seen it before working in internal comms for a publishing house, just how different that is. How much more formal that is, how much more academic it was. It was an academic publishers, and so like even within your emails, you're speaking to your colleagues that way, you're speaking to customers that way, you're speaking to suppliers that way. And then working in another organization that's a bit more, they want to take a bit more risks, they want to kind of be a bit more millennial and Gen Z, they're using different language, like even within the communications we're having with one another. And so then the comms you share with customers and external facing people, that tends to be the same as well. And it does change. It really does affect your psyche. So if you think about the first job you did and the way you sent emails, is that the same way you're sending emails now? Especially if you're working at another company, if those companies are different. So I definitely think, that's one of the best ways to engage change, especially if you are building brand awareness, is to get the people inside on board. And a lot of that is by using the same type of communication, because then they'll just get used to it and they'll start using it.
Oh, super interesting. Berti, is brand building important in the asset management world, or is it more product oriented?
A good question. Brand is very important. Investors will invest with a company that has fantastic reputation. Your brand is your reputation. Step a foot out of line in asset management and your brand's gone, your reputation's gone. It's one of those things, 2008 is a clear indication on how bad it can actually go. You had the likes of Lehman Brothers, biggest asset manager house in the world, biggest reputation. They were spending a huge amount of money on marketing, and they made a mistake, and bam, they're no longer existent. So So brand is very, very important. But then what will happen is it depends on how far the potential client is coming on board. They will be looking at your brand, and then they'll put the brand aside and they'll go, right, okay, I understand your tonality, I understand the way that you talk, I understand everything about it, I like that, that's great. Show me the performance. Do your funds perform? Simple as that. Yes or no, and that's where the decisions are made. So they'll come on board with the brand. Another big one to look at is Credit Suisse, where they've, you know, UBS has to buy them now, one of the biggest in the world. Great brand, you know, great story, everything's there. Fell on the heavy side, and then naturally UBS had to pick them up and carry them over the line and integrate that into the business. So you see this all the time, where you have the brand working, but then the performance just falls and fails. And this is the reason why the FCA and the regulator wants us to be transparent, because for the investor, it's vitally important for them to see that you are being transparent, your brand is being transparent, and your communication has been transparent. So yeah, that's my.
I think it was interesting you talked about having a slightly different way of speaking once people are kind of engaged. And I think that's probably quite common as well. Like you probably need to have a slightly different. So people that haven't yet given you an email address or replied to a prospecting email or something, you almost have to you have to make them aware of why they should even care at all. And it sometimes, I think, sometimes weirdly kind of more direct when it's cold, and then as soon as they're engaged with you, you actually want to stop selling and sort of start talking, you know, pointing them at other bits of content and just kind of.
Yeah, it also depends on the asset manager you're dealing with. So if you're an institutional asset manager, that a sale will take 3 years. So that's the conversation that you're having. It's a 3-year conversation. It's not just happening over a 2-month period. Yeah. If you're on the wholesale side of things, then yes, then 2-3 months is a norm. So you will come in quite cold. You will come in with, you know, with the trust you need to provide. That trust is the language and the language that we'll be using there, and then it's all about then putting people in front of that person to make them feel more comfortable, putting the PM in front of the investor. It depends on the size of the investment, naturally. You know, the PM's not going to sit in front of a investor that's only investing £1 million or, you know, £50,000. Those are small investments. But if it's a pension fund that's £1 billion pension fund, they'll put three PMs in front of them. And that conversation will happen for 3 years, and then that money will come over, and then the conversation will change, the wording and the tonality will change, because they'll come on board from a trust point of view, but then it's like, show us the figures, and then that's the transparency where it comes in through from the where they will show the transparency, and that transparency will show in the tonality and also part of the brand. So that is all. When we build out a brand at an asset manager, we talk about from start to finish how that tone will change with an investor.
So it's like starting out with credibility, and then pivoting to relationship. Sounds a bit like
100%.
So the brand becomes the relationship they have with individuals.
Yeah. I spoke to Jacqueline about this. I'll give you a scenario that we actually had, where a very famous asset manager was losing one of their senior staff, and the news broke about this. And then I went and approached all the sales team. I said, listen, the sales team, show me all your people that are invested in this company as well as us, and we'll send out an email, we'll reassure them, we'll give them all of those. By doing that email, I think it was in a 36-hour span, we had an investment of 250 million just come back into our door, just like that.
So what they cared about was not the brand, they cared about that relationship, which is the brand, I know, but
correct. But because we were able to take advantage of that situation, not in a bad way, but it's because when this is the thing about in asset management, they invest, people invest in the PMs. They want to know that that person is looking after their money and looking after them at the end of the day, because they don't want to lose money. So as soon as that happens, they know that the investments are not going to be happening the same. This is the reason why Warren Buffett is so wealthy, because his investments are so solid, and the way that he's done it, and anybody that follows him and follows how he invests will make money. It's just logical. And what we did there was going, right, okay, you've already invested with us, give us some more of that money and we'll look after it. It's all stable here. And that's what happened, and we were able to gain that 250 million through the door in virtually 36 hours. And that it took time to get them over. It's about 6-month process, but they committed within 36 hours that they'll pull out and pay the fees that needed to be paid, and then move that over to us. So yeah.
And what was you mentioned to me the importance of having the technological infrastructure to be able of doing what you did, right?
100%. This is one thing that I do stress to all the businesses whenever I work with them. Always make sure your data is clean. Always understand that your data is, if I want to pick up the data immediately and do something with it, I can do it. I don't want to be fumbling around for days and days for you to go through, manage it. So we were very lucky in that aspect, that we had decided, well, we're going to be using a strong CRM. We moved over to Salesforce, and we were using Salesforce at that stage, and we pushed through with that. And then we also used a very robust email marketing system that was talking to the system. So when I spoke to the team, and I spoke to my content writer to write the email accordingly, I gave them a rough draft. They came back with a finalized draft, and we sent out that email was an hour and a half after the news broke. So it was about moving rapidly.
Missing email addresses, missing fields. Yeah, it would have taken you 2 weeks. You would have got distracted. Yeah.
It is a bit of a nightmare, and this is one of the reasons why I believe that when you're using data, always make sure your data is the most up to date it can be, and put as much data in as possible. More data is better. At the end of the day, when it comes to a CRM, for example.
What about the challenges of communicating complex because this market is heavily regulated, right? So what about the challenges of communicating in this market? Annie, you also you also need to communicate for a financial industry, right? So all the regulations that you need to follow, is it too complex to mix that also with the human elements and everything that we've been discussing?
I think that's a really good question. I think my answer is going to be similar to something Berti said earlier in our conversation about how using layman's terms is one of the most important parts of content and getting your message across. At the end of the day, communicating is about getting your message across. It's not about using fancy words. It's not about using complications, but definitely in terms of the sort of regulations. I mean, not even disclosing where I work, for example. Not being allowed to do that. I don't necessarily think it does cause a challenge. I think there's always ways around, understanding why those regulations are there, and then using the words that you can to explain what is meant. So something that is very policy driven. There's a lot of legal language. So we see this all the time with SMEs within, in particular, legal. And you're trying to communicate across to, internally to HR, to all your colleagues, some new policy. And then because of regulations about how you need to say that can, impact a copywriter. So it's very much, about balancing between what needs to be said from a legal point of view, and also what needs to be said so the person understands. So there's always been conversations where SMEs and editors notoriously hate each other because we're always trying to change what an author or an SME is saying, but it's more about trying to get the message across as simply as possible. So a lot of the time, legal jargon or regulatory jargon will be added in the notes rather than in the actual message that we're sending across. So And we do try to keep, you do try to keep that to a minimum anyway, because people aren't going to be reading that much. If they want to know, for example, can I go on leave? Can I take a career break? How is that going to impact my salary, my pension, all those kind of things? You have to be as clear as possible and communicate that as pleasantly as possible as well. Maybe it's an emergency. You've got to think about all the different scenarios that a person could be going through, and try to get them that information as clearly as possible. And then with the regulatory policy driven language, include that, but that's not the answer to the question. So a lot of the time, the pushback from copywriters or editors has been that, okay, what is the answer to the question? And they'll tell you in an email, yes, and it will tell you, then that should be what's on the page. It shouldn't be this 200 word paragraph on the legal side of it. That needs to be included. But essentially, we have to think of the colleague first, and remember that not everybody works in legal, not everybody understands, and then taking into account neurodivergence as well. That's a big one. How somebody reads something, if they do have neurodivergence, will they read it in a different way? And taking that into account, and including diversity within that conversation is a really important part of kind of creating that balance. So yeah, it is a challenge, but usually the copywriter wins, because we say, look, this makes sense, so people will understand. If they don't know, they can just send an email, or if there's a chatbot function, maybe they can ask. But we don't want anybody to be clicking around a website trying to find an answer. They should just be given the information as clearly as possible, especially if it's sort of a regulation or something more legal.
Yeah, you Berti also mentioned that it was totally fine to communicate a brand. However, communicating products could be more challenging for regulations, right?
100%. We can't communicate any product whatsoever. Can't mention the name of the product. You can't mention you cannot mention you can't mention the performance of the product. So you will hear us in the asset management space. We all talk about a strategy. So it's all strategies, and that's what we work in. But it's the product at the end of the day. But we use the word strategy for that specific reason, because it is exactly what we're doing. We are working on a strategy to invest accordingly and so forth. But yeah, the regulator doesn't want us talking about performance in any way, shape, or form. And we cannot talk about predicted performance. We can only show past performance, and you have to be very clear about how you do it. I mean, as a copywriter, you know that you've got to have your footnotes. Your footnotes have to be 1, 2, 3, 4. They just there. If you've got many, it's one of those things, unfortunately. But you have to show exactly why you're saying what you're saying, and you've got to back it up. It's no longer just it's like when we're talking to the investment the investment managers, we say to them, where they come through and they give us their insight of a macro or whatever the case may be of how their fund that they're looking after is going to perform. And it goes through so much scrutiny, it's ridiculous. So they'll do a slide deck for us. We've worked with slide decks, 50 to 80 slides in a deck, and every single one has to be scrutinized before it goes into a webinar, before it gets shared, because we cannot talk about performance. And if we do talk about performance, we talk about past performance. And the people that we're talking to, they have to naturally be, depends on how we're talking. If they're a institutional investor, it'll be a complete different content way that we're talking. But if they are a wholesale investor, can't do any of that. We won't even show it. We won't even do any past performance, because they are a wholesale investor. They me and you. We don't know anything about investing. We need to go to an investment professional. Even if I've invested and I've made up 50 million, it doesn't matter. That only makes me a sophisticated investor. So yeah, so the communication needs to be very clear and transparent as well, from the FCA point of view. And it's different in different regions. You would think that the FCA works the exact same as the French regulator does, the same as the Swiss regulator. Nope, they're all totally different. So yeah. So my last two businesses that I've been working with, Swiss regulated, and yeah, they're like, why don't you do this in the UK? I'm like, you can't do it in the UK. The FCA will not allow that. So it's very, very interesting how the different regulators work as well.
You shared with me an anecdote. This is more brand related, but something that you thought that was footprints in the sand. I think it was something that you thought that could be totally acceptable in a Western society. It was totally wrong in another.
Yeah, so we did a rebrand at one of the businesses that I was at. This is going back, donkey's years, and we did this whole rebrand, spent oodles of money on it, and we launched the rebrand, fantastic, and went off, sent all the brand over to the Middle East, and they just went, whoa, we cannot show that. Stop, whatever you're doing, we can't do that because we cannot show feet in the Middle East.
Right. Yeah,
It's very insulting. So we had to go and change the whole Middle East thing to show how we were doing it, because we were trying to show that we're going to walk on this journey together with you. And it was just a bit chaotic, but we got it resolved.
I was lucky you had someone internally that could actually give you that guidance.
Yeah. But we didn't think. You don't think of these things. You think you're walking along a beach sand, and no. We couldn't show any bare feet whatsoever. And I was just like, oh my God. Luckily enough, I wasn't in charge of the art side of things, but yeah, it was quite forthcoming when we went. So they ran on the old branding for a couple of months till we transitioned them to the new one, and we brought it in more in line.
Yeah, that's a very good example that not only technical regulations are important, but also brand
cultural
nuances, cultural, exactly. Well, thank you so much for sharing all your engagement strategies and demonstrating the importance of personalized content and the human element in marketing. It's been a really nice conversation.